You thought all I did was talk.
Yeah. Well, don't we all, you know. But anyway, I wanted to drop by and tell our friends, and especially those who might be interested in the Palace Ballroom on the lake, that our band tonight is going to be Sammy Kaye, with a lot of ties with Cleveland, you know.
Sure.
Sammy started here. His home was in Rocky River, and he, I believe, was educated in his secondary schools here. That's high school and stuff. Then went on to universities here in Ohio, and turned out to be a very famous band. And in our star spot, a man for whom I have a particular admiration, that's Arthur Prysock, the singer. Outstanding. And he's going to wow them tonight at the Palace.
The Palace Ballroom, let's explain it real fast. It was invented by you, and
yes, many years ago, when DOK was just beginning, we were the seventh station in town. We were needed like a hole in the head, as the saying goes, and plus that, 3 television stations had come on with a crunch, so the audience had moved in many directions, so who needed us? So as program director, I had to think of something that might get us at least a small audience of some particular kind. So we had a band concert that summer, which was entirely fictional, a hometown park band concert in which everybody who was identified with it was a figment of my imagination. I had sound effects, I had orchestra, band, and I had applause, laughs, cheers, and all of those good things. And all of a sudden came Labor Day, and I realized, to my horror, that this little audience that we had built would be dissipated because we could no longer do band concerts after Labor Day, outdoor band concerts. So I had to think of something to bring them indoors, and we came up with the Waltz Palace on the lake. Yes. And this is an update.
And tonight, it's presented by Spermuli Goodyear Marathon. Also, it's the Brunswick Library, the scene of the old-time radio and phonograph show happening this Sunday from 1 until 5 p.m. There will be refreshments and all kinds of electronic instruments from the turn of the century and more, too.
3WE News Time is now 20 minutes before 8 o'clock. Good morning, I'm Kevin Donahue. Thanks for joining us for the 3WE Weekend Update on this Saturday morning, April 25th, 1992. If you are a history and antique buff, and if you happen to have, let's say, some old phonographic records from, say, maybe 60, 70, 80 or more years ago, well, the place you want to be tomorrow is at the Brunswick Library for the Buckeye Antique Radio and Phonograph Collectors Club show. Joining us now on the 3WE Live line to talk about that is Jim Davison of the club. Good morning, Jim. How are you?
Good morning, Kevin. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing okay, given the fact that the weather is rather lousy all weekend long. A good place to do is something inside. And
right.
Sounds like that should be good for you tomorrow.
Right. We were hoping for cooler weather tomorrow, and it looks like it's only going up to 45, 50 or so.
So we'll blame you. The Buckeye Antique Radio and Phonograph Collectors, what sorts of things do you have? Do you go way, way back to some of those old crank-up machines?
Right. We have a big collection of old phonographs, and we'll be displaying some crystal sets, a lot of Edison material, early battery sets, early electric sets, very early microphones, the old spring and carbon microphones, and books, catalogs from the 20s, just anything like that. Anything. Victor phonographs, Edison.
Does this still work, some of this equipment?
Right. Just about everything still works. And we have a lot of collectors that are setting up tomorrow. A lot of this stuff will be for sale. And the club has been around here in, we cover like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio for about 23 years now. And until about this year, it's really gotten popular and a lot of promotions about the club. And we're starting to do more mall shows and more things throughout the year, like picnics. And we meet now every other month, and it's only $5 a year. And applications will be there tomorrow if anybody's interested in joining. And to get there, you can just take Route 303 past Hinckley out to Brunswick, and it's about a half a mile past I-71 heading west.
Okay, that's the Brunswick Library,
right.
Of course.
And the address is 3649 Center Road.
I would imagine that over the years, it's kind of difficult to really get working parts for any of these old equipment, no?
Yes. Even to find the radios now, they're getting more scarce because there's more clubs growing throughout each state. Ohio used to only have one club, and now I believe they're up to 3 or 4, and the same with Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania. And just about every state now has got 2 or 3 clubs out there. And you can go to flea markets, and you've got to get there early if you want to find something, because there's a lot of collectors getting interested. It's a big growing club lately.
Jim, I'm not a real technical person regarding some of the early radios and phonographs, but can you pick up some of today's stations on some of these older models?
Oh yeah, anything that a lot of crystal sets used to cover a good 250-mile radius, and you could still hook up just an antenna and a ground wire to a crystal set and still listen to all these stations, especially like the ones here in Cleveland. And most of your 50,000-watt stations will come in at night, no problem.
Such as 3WE, I might add?
Right. There's a plug. No. But it's really nice that, I still build these sets, too, and a lot of these sets will be for sale tomorrow, including parts and perhaps phonograph parts. And there's still dealers around the area here. Just in Cleveland alone, I know about 4 or 5 different phonograph collectors that do repair these things, and some of them should be on hand with phone numbers if anybody has anything that needs to be fixed or repaired. And it's getting tough to find these parts these days.
Jim, this is kind of fitting you're having this weekend, because today, back in 1908, this is the anniversary of the birth of famed broadcast journalist Edwin R. Murrow, who, of course, probably used a lot of the microphones, or at least prototypes that you're going to be on display, and a lot of people listened on those sets, I'm sure.
Yeah, and not only that, but next year, I'll probably give you guys a call next September 26th, because that's when you, 1100 AM, will be 70 years old, which started as WTAM back here in Cleveland 70 years ago, and went to KYW and then WKYC, and then was bought out by Ted Stepien for the flagship station of his Cleveland Cavaliers back in the early 70s. So you guys will be throwing your 70th birthday.
Yeah, we ought to have you do our history.
Right.
Jim, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Good luck tomorrow, and we hope to see you out there.
Good. I hope you guys can come out and a lot of your listeners and help support these kind of clubs, because we have to keep preserving the history of radio and phonograph and let the new generation see what it was all about back then.
Thank you, Jim. Have a good day.
You too, Kevin.
All right. Jim Davison of the Buckeye Antique Radio and Phonograph Collectors Club show, and that show will be at the Brunswick Library tomorrow afternoon from 1 until 5.
26, 540, time for our wake-up call on News Radio 1100, 3WE. Let's say good morning to Jim Davison. How you doing, Jim?
Good morning there. How you doing?
Great. Nice to have you with us. We first got a chance to talk with you a little bit. You called us up to point out that, what was it, our 60th birthday at 1100?
Yeah, it was your 68th back in September, the old WTAM birthday.
Right. So we appreciate you pointing that out to us. And at the time you mentioned that you were going to have this show coming up at the Chapel Hill Mall, and it's tomorrow. Why don't you give us the particulars?
Right, it's tomorrow and it's Sunday. It's organized by the Buckeye Antique Radio and Phonograph Show. And we're going to have a bunch of old radios, crystal sets, 3-dial battery sets, Philcos, plus phonographs, including Thomas Edison material and miscellaneous. It's up at Chapel Hill Show, and it'll be up there from the time the doors open until they close for the public. And we'll have about 14 tables set up, all sorts of old radio station memorabilia, and all sorts of stuff like that. It's free to the public, and you can also join the club for $5 a year. And for more information, you can contact Steve Dandu out in Akron at 1-666-7222. And the club's been around about 20 years. And just want to thank 3WE there for helping us out here.
No problem. Is this also a situation where if you're interested in collecting that type of stuff, is this a buy, sell, swap type of a show also?
Right. Yeah, a lot of guys out there in the club who have been around for about 20 years go out there, and they also sell some of their things. So if you're looking for I know one guy's going to sell an old Philco Model 70, and he's the president of the club. He's from Euclid. He's going to sell one of those. And you can pick up some of this stuff pretty cheap. Most of the stuff will still work, too. Most of it's in mint condition.
If you need parts for your old radio, anybody parts and that type of stuff, too?
Right. Plus, you'll get a lot of business cards out there, too. So if you're looking for something that you don't see there, most likely the collector has them at home.
That's the Chapel Hill Mall in Akron, and let's see, I'm trying to think what exit you can get on Route 8, take the expressway down there, right?
You can even get off at, I think it's Howell Road, and take Howell Road straight up about a mile. It should be on your right-hand side on Brickman Road.
Right, that's the place. Right.
And
what are your hours Saturday and Sunday?
I believe it's 9:30 in the morning until 9 at night, and I think Sunday it's from noon to 5.
Okay.
I'm not really sure on the hours, but it's pretty close.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Good
Right.
luck. Hope you have a great turnout.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jim.
Have a good day.
Jim Davison, who is with the Buckeye Antique Radio and Phonograph Club, and their big show, swap meet and sale going on Saturday and Sunday at the Chapel Hill Mall in Akron. And good morning. Well, if you're into the antique radios and phonographs and everything that goes along with it, we've got some details on a fun show coming up for you. Rich Bradley's vice president of the Buckeye Antique Radio and Phonograph Club. Good morning, Rich. How are you?
Good morning, Jim. How you doing?
I'm real good. Tell me about the show that you got coming up.
Well, Sunday, April 18th, between 1 and 4:30 at the Brunswick Library. They're on 303. We're going to have a real nice show for anybody that's interested in either radio memorabilia or any antique radios, phonographs, early crystal sets, and some battery sets and that kind of thing.
Now, is this a chance to buy and sell, or is it more for just demonstration?
Well, this is more for demonstration, but I was kind of hoping that if any of the listeners had an antique radio or phonograph that they would, like to have appraised or repaired or sold, they could bring it on down.
Okay.
And if it's too big to bring down, if they bring us the model number, we could research it for them.
Oh, all right.
You know?
Now, how do people need to let you know ahead of time, or could they just come on down to the show with their equipment and go
No,
from
they
there?
could just come on down, Jim. That'd be fine.
Now, give us the time and the place again for those who aren't familiar with where the library is out in Brunswick.
Okay. This would be either off of I-271 or off of I-71 at 303.
Mm-hmm.
And if they just head west on 303 until they pass the I-71 303 exit, about a mile up on the right on 303 is your Brunswick Library.
Okay.
And I got a phone number for them if they need it.
All right.
And that's 273-4150. And someone there at the library can give them some directions from wherever they're at.
Do people have these kinds of radios and phonographs? Are they pretty common, but people just don't think about them because they've always been in the family or always been upstairs in the attic?
Sometimes that is the case, yeah. And, we've been interested in them for a long time. Our club goes back 23 years, although I've only been with them about 3 years.
Well, what's the fascination for you?
Well, I think it's because I can remember growing up in Cleveland and just about always listening to 1100, you know.
Yeah.
And my grandfather always told me about WTAM, you know, and I was fascinated with that. And I teach electronics, and so that's kind of the attraction, you know.
Well, the club, the Buckeye Antique Radio and Phonograph Club, is helping us research and put together material for our 70th anniversary, which is coming up in September.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be a lot of fun.
Yes, I'll tell you, we're going to get together with Jim Davison, the editor, and Jim and I are going to write a book on WTAM, you know, and KYW and WKYC and all the changes that that the station went through. It seemed like when I was in high school, 1100 was a station that you listened to. You know? In fact, let me tell you a funny story. I had a 56 Pontiac with noisy ignition wires, and when I tuned to 1100 on the dial, it was the only one that the ignition noise had disappeared on. so that was one of my favorite stations for a lot of reasons.
Well, times have changed. FM has changed the mix somewhat, but hopefully this station now, 3WE, will have these call letters for 70 years, and I doubt if we'll still be talking about it 70 years from now, but who knows? If we're lucky, knock on wood, maybe we will be.
Well, I hope so.
Well, again, the big show's coming up Sunday the 18th. Brunswick Library is the place, and that's right on 303. And what time are we going to start again?
Okay, we're going to start at 1 o'clock, and it goes up to 4:30.
So if anybody has any antique phonographs or radios they'd like to bring down, they're more than welcome to do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Rich, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Again, the phone number, 273-4150, if you have questions. 273-4150, Rich Bradley, Vice President of the Buckeye Antique Radio and Phonograph Club. And again, in September, our 70th anniversary, and that's the perfect opportunity for me to remind you, and perhaps you haven't heard about it yet.
That is 1-1. And this crowd just waiting forward at every pitch. One out of the drive back in the right field. A long one. The ball game is over.
Listen to that crowd. That's a big crowd. 1930s baseball. One of the memories on this radio station. The announcers, unfortunately, aren't identified, but I could have sworn I heard a holy cow somewhere in the background.
Either that or Jimmy Dudley trying to pawn some aluminum siding off on
Doing Phonograph Club, and he corresponds with us here
at 3WE quite a bit, sending us all kinds of neat articles and press releases and just all kinds of great information about the 70 years that has spanned this radio station. So we're going to talk more with Jim and have him pass along some of the interesting background of this station, which has been on 1100 for a number of years, but as Jim will explain, didn't start out 50 kilowatts. Just didn't happen as a 50 kilowatt flame-throwing, blowtorch, clear channel radio station. It had a little bit more humble beginnings than that. So we'll talk to Jim about that after the news. Ed Corey is in St. Louis to give you firsthand. Now, to get we heard Ed live in St. Louis. Big news day here in Cleveland, but this is how it used to sound a few years back on this radio station.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.
This is NBC News. President says American power is restrained in Vietnam.
So Letterman's not the only guy to jump ship from NBC. This radio station left NBC a number of years ago. Of course, now we're owned by the Booth American Broadcasting Company. We've been owned by Westinghouse in the past, by NBC in the past. Gannett owned this place at one point?
I was an intern in 81.
Oh, really?
Gannett owned it then.
Well, so you've been around this place for a while. All right. Jim Davidson's been following the history of this and other radio stations. He's an Antique Radio and Phonograph Club member, and Jim has written to us, and I've talked to Jim many times. Good morning, Jim. Nice to talk to you again. How are you?
Good morning once again, Jim.
Tell me how this all got started. Take us back, if you will, to the very beginning.
Okay, up on in Cleveland back in 1923, there was a Willard Storage Battery Company which made batteries for cars. And the man who owned it was Theodore A. Willard, and he decided to take his ham set and get an FCC license approved for it, and on September 26, 1923, he owned WTAM, and those are the call letters which he applied for, and the FCC gave it to him, and he powered the whole station through his batteries using 5,000 cells at 10,000 volts.
So we got about, 1,500 watts, something like that, wasn't it, out of the original stick?
Right, and this was located up on East 131st and Taft Street.
How long did it take for us to wind up on 1,150 kilowatts, Jim?
Oh, probably 4 or 5 years.
Okay, so it really wasn't that long.
No, WTAM stood for Where the Artists Meet.
Isn't that interesting?
And yes, and the station was first heard on 1070 AM with 3,500 watts, about a year later.
Okay.
Which was still battery-powered. And in 1928, WTAM was purchased by the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company and was changed to 1080 AM with 5,000 watts of power.
So it used to be owned by CEI for a while.
Right, and that's when you guys were in the Union Trust Building. And then a year later, in 29, TAM constructed 2 new towers in Brecksville, each being 200 feet high, and the power was then raised to 50,000 watts, making TAM the strongest and clearest station in the U.S.
That's interesting.
Well, and that's when it was changed to 1100 AM.
Well, Jim, tell me this. The TAM stands for Where the Artists Meet. Tell us about some of the giants in the entertainment business that got started. Okay, Tom Manning, who started doing the Indians announcing back in the late 20s and early 30s, got his start there, and then he did a live WTAM remote every Saturday from Alpine Village at Playhouse Square. And Gene and Glenn also got their start, so they were the two comedians which made you forget about the Depression for 15 minutes every day. And Bob Hope got a start there, Guy Lombardo, Lub and Abner, Fred Warning, just a bunch of people. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the people that have walked in and out of the halls, wherever they have happened to been over the years of this radio station for the past 70 years, is just amazing. What is it that motivates you, Jim, to be so interested in the years of radio gone by? What's the hook for you? Well, I started attending a station down in Yorksville from a friend of mine who lived with us, rented a room here. He worked at WKYC and KYW. The television station. I've been going down there since about 9 years old, and believe it or not, he's had the station for 30 years, and he still uses the same equipment, the same 77s and 44 RCA microphones and the transmitting equipment. And to me, I take that over any modern equipment any day. And I still, when he retired from there, they gave him a bunch of WTAM equipment, and he ended up giving me the old 30s console along with the transcription tables and a lot of TAM. NBC had bought the station in 1938, in 1930.
October 16th that year. And then you guys moved again, and this time to the new NBC building located on East 9th and Superior in 1938.
Wow.
And in 56, the station moved again, this time to East 6th.
We moved around a little bit, Jim. Now,
right.
We're, of course, in the Western Reserve Building. I want to ask you one favor before we run out of time here.
Yes.
And thanks for all of that information. Yes. Obviously, when it comes to what's happened in the past of the radio station, you're like a walking history book. But would you do me a favor, and can you guys involve with the Buckeye Antique Radio and Phonograph Club, and you talked about, the equipment that's out there, the different things that are out there. Would you think about what you feel would be a good representation of the past of this radio station in our time capsule?
Yes, we would.
Would you do that for me?
And one quick thing,
Sure.
I think when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is built, they ought to put one room aside just for the early Cleveland radio broadcasting memorabilia.
It's a good idea.
Like early transmitters, microphones. A lot of the club members would donate their items to be displayed here in this room.
Well, Jim, you talk to the Rock Hall about that, and then you keep in touch with us about what you think would be a nice addition to our time capsule, and we'll talk more about the history of the radio station and our time capsule project as we go along. Yeah.
One guy at work did want me to tell you he had an excellent selection for the or an item for the time capsule, and I thought it was great too. He wanted to see in a concealed container a Cleveland Stadium hot dog with the stadium original mustard.
That's a great idea. Well, maybe we could seal it. Well, we're going to have to put the technical people. Joe Castaway Coolest can freeze dry anything, right?
Right.
Maybe we should. Maybe there's a way that we could. Maybe there's a technology available where we could preserve it, and then 70 years from now, somebody could actually eat it.
Yeah, because
wouldn't that be fun?
Nobody can replace that taste,
All right, thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Jim Davison, member of the Buckeye Antique Radio and Phonograph Club. Thanks for the history and for the ideas. Maybe that's where the ideas come from. That's a great one. I know you've got some too. Traffic and weather together.
The National Broadcasting Company presents a special bulletin from the Press Radio News. Trenton, New Jersey. Bruno Richard Hauptmann was electrocuted at 8:47 tonight for the murder of the Lindbergh baby. This bulletin is from the Press Radio Bureau. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
7 p.m. Eastern Wartime. Bob Trout reporting. The Japanese have accepted our terms fully. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the Second World War. The United Nations are united and are victorious.
Interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Stay tuned to WOR for further developments, which will be broadcast immediately as received.
WHK is winning races. WHK, color channel 14, Cleveland Radio.
What time is it? 1 minute left. It's 19 minutes past 12. Well, folks, that means we're just about ready to pack up and say farewell to our old address, 1480. At exactly 20 minutes past 12, we're going to give you a spoken signal to give a quick turn on your dial to 1220, the spot we showed you when we came on the air with this program. The first thing you're going to hear on our new wavelength will be a long, sustained tone. That's just to help you find our way. Then you will hear in a moment our national anthem. And now, Mr. Hannes, will you do the closing honors on 1480? This is WGAR, owned and operated by the WGAR Broadcasting Company, transmitting on a frequency of 1480 kilocycles by authority of the Federal Communications Commission. Now leaving the air to return in a moment on our newly assigned frequency, 1220 kilocycles. Stand by, everybody. We have now exactly 15 seconds. Remember, we showed you where 1220 is. In just 10 seconds, make your switch. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, switch to 1220. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. 12:21 p.m. Eastern Wartime, June 4th, 1944. Station WGAR, owned and operated by the WGAR Broadcasting Company, begins a new period of service to Greater Cleveland and Northern Ohio, operating on a clear channel at 1220 kilocycles and with 5,000 watts power by authority of the Federal Communications Commission. Our dedication program continues. We'd like to take just a moment of this dedicatory program to take you out to our new transmitter located on Broadview and Aikens Road in Brecksville, Ohio, where Dave Baylor is waiting to describe the work that has been done in order that we might make this change in our operation today. All right, Dave Baylor.
While I stood here a moment ago and watched Don McAllister waiting to throw the switch, putting this transmitter on the air, we looked at each other. Neither of us said a word, but both of us knew what we were thinking. We were thinking of the hours behind the simple flip of that switch, the drawing, the planning, the engineering, and the physical moving. The signal came, and Max threw the switch. Just a little black key, not much different from the one on your electric fan. We waited. And when the last note of our national anthem came through the speaker here a moment ago, Max said, "Well, I guess it works." And then he sat down.
WGAR, Cleveland's friendly station.
Good afternoon. This is Wayne Mack coming before you to tell of a major event which in a few moments will greatly affect this station, WGAR, and its service to Cleveland and Northern Ohio. Before this brief program is over, WGAR will no longer be operating at its presently licensed power of 5,000 watts. It will instead set into motion a new and gigantic transmitting plant of 10 times that power and begin operation at 50,000 watts. The highest granted by the Federal Communications Commission, to become one of the largest among American broadcasting stations. Frankly, this is a day about which we have long dreamed. Now it is here. And it's the right day, too, the 4th of July, around which ringing date is riveted strongly every code and creed of service to home and nation.
It includes living quarters in case of emergency. It includes an emergency diesel-powered power supply in case of power failure. And over the 50 acres of land on which this building is located are the WGAR towers. These towers, of which there are 5, point their peaks 200 feet into the air, and they point our radio signal in the direction we desire. One of the major items in the construction of this new transmitter was wire. We have 30 miles of copper wire connecting the towers to the transmitter in our ground system, and 4 miles of wire in the transmitter itself. As I stand here now and see the engineer on duty watching the maze of switches and lights, it seems a very simple operation. But it represents 7 years of research, field tests, and endless study by the engineering staff of WGAR, headed by our vice president in charge of engineering, Morris R. Pierce. This building took over a year to complete. The transmitter took over a year to design and install. But today, the hum of excitement exceeds even the hum of the kilowatt. For with a new and greater voice, with many new friends to join those who have been with us for the past 15 years, we extend the hand of welcome to you to see our new transmitter. You'll find it interesting and informative, and you'll enjoy meeting the men and science who are behind the voice. This is Bob Neal speaking to you from WGAR's new transmitter building, and we take you now to Van Patrick at the Municipal Stadium.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, everybody. Speaking to you now from Cleveland Stadium, where in just about 10 minutes, the Cleveland Indians and the Detroit Tigers will play the first game of a doubleheader. It's a beautiful day here in Cleveland Stadium, a crowd of around 30,000 for this doubleheader. And that's a great day for WGAR, becoming a 50,000-watt radio station in just about 10 minutes from now. And now before our WGAR microphone is Lou Boudreau, the greatest shortstop in baseball today and the manager of the Cleveland Indians. Lou, 50,000 watts means that a lot of listeners all over the country now will be able to hear these Cleveland Indian baseball games.
Well, that's fine, Van. I certainly want to congratulate WJAR, and I'd like to see them get ahead, just like I hope that the Indians now will get some few watts in their bats and get some base hits and runs.
Well, Lou, I think we'll do that today. It's just about time we took 2 games from those Tigers today, isn't it?
Well, I hope so. We'll take that first one, Van, then we'll battle for that second one.
Well, Lou, you want to name the starting pitcher for the listeners today?
Yes, I would like to. The starting pitcher for the day is Black in the first game, and Embry will work the second game.
Well, Lou, since we've got many, many new listeners today, so we'd like to dedicate this 50,000 watts with a twin win.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lou. That was Lou Boudreau, the manager of the Cleveland Indians. Now the greatest pitcher in baseball today, Bob Feller. Bob, what do you think about 50,000 watts?
Well, I've been looking for this for a long time. My wife is over in Waukegan, and now she can listen to all the ball games over WGAR, and during the winter I'll be able to keep in much closer touch with Cleveland by tuning into WGAR over at home and the shores of Lake Michigan. And I'm sure that all the baseball fans in Ohio and throughout the central Middle West here will really appreciate your efforts in getting 50,000 watts for the baseball broadcast on WGAR.
Thank you very much, Bob.
You're welcome.
That was Bob Feller, the greatest pitcher in baseball, and now here's the genial president of the Cleveland Indians, Bill Beck. And now, Bill, we can carry this message of the Cleveland Indians all over the Middle West with these 50,000 watts.
Well, Van, we've been waiting quite a while for this.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.